If you are here for our Filing Your FAFSA and DREAM Act webinar, you are in the correct place. Thank you so much for being on time and being prompt. We're going to have a very small group with us this evening. I think because we are in December officially, finals are next week, so I don't blame you all for wanting a little bit more time to yourselves. My name is Kristen Jones-Manning. I am a part of the CUSD-Futureology team. I am joined here this evening with two of my other colleagues, Erica and B. They will be handling the Q&A portion. If you have some additional questions as we are speaking tonight, they are going to be on hand to help me answer most of those. We are going to get started, like I said, in just a few moments. So hang tight, make sure you have a pen or things that you might need to take notes if you'd like. This presentation is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel later this week. The slides will also be made available for you as you registered for this event. So if there is a specific link or resource that you see tonight as a part of the slide presentation, no worries, those will be shared with you as well. So a little bit more of a regurgitation for our instructions for tonight. There will be some links in this presentation that will be active for you to use. Some of them we will click on as a part of the presentation, others we will not. This is a webinar format, so your cameras and your microphones are turned off. I can't see or hear you, but you are more than welcome to ask questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. There are no questions that are too small to ask in regards to financial aid. If you are able to save them to the end of the presentation, that is wonderful. If you hear or see something that you have questions about, throw it in the Q&A at that point. This presentation is one of many that are available to you. We had a little note in the registration for tonight's event, actually, that we hosted a basics of financial aid presentation during the college fair in October. So there are a few things that are included in that presentation that we will not be discussing this evening. So if you want more of a foundational understanding about financial aid and how financial aid works, that presentation is currently recorded on our YouTube channel, and it is a wonderful starter point for senior families. I should also mention that tonight's webinar is predominantly going to be covering the actual forms that you fill out for financial aid, including the FAFSA and the California DREAM Act. So if you are a 9th, 10th, or 11th grader, this could be helpful information for you, but it will be most applicable to you as you are a senior student. So just something to keep in mind for tonight. We are the Futureology team, like I said, that is putting on this presentation. My name again is Kristen Jones-Manning. I'm joined by Erica and B, two other colleagues of mine. Futureology is a district level program within Capistrano Unified. We are credentialed school counselors, we are experienced admissions readers, and we provide data-driven additional support for all students in our district, specifically for high school students at this point. We host individual one-on-one counseling appointments, we have targeted outreach, and then host group and large-scale events like this. So if you are new to our program or just hearing about us for the first time, we have our hand in a lot of hats. We're in a lot of different places, and it's a really fun job to have. So one other official disclaimer as we get started this evening: Futureology college and career counselors, myself included, as well as your high school guidance teams, are well equipped to walk you through completing the financial aid forms that we are going to discuss this evening. However, we are not financial planners or tax preparation professionals. So as we review frequently asked questions, as we go through the checklist of documents and things that you might need to complete either one of these forms, please keep in mind that we're not going to be able to address specific financial situations by individual family, especially as it regards to filing your own taxes. Tax preparation professionals and financial planners are, of course, the best resource to do that with, but we can certainly walk you through the things that the form needs, what you might need to be able to complete those, and walking sure to make sure you know how to submit and sign them. So what are we going to be covering this evening? We are covering a lot tonight. I'm going to try and be brief as much as possible. We are going to cover both what are the FAFSA and the California DREAM Act forms and identify the key differences between them, including who completes which form. It's an important piece of information to start with. We're going to walk through creating your ID or account for each form, a checklist of the required documents that will be needed to complete each form, what the sections of each form look like, signing and submitting, and then frequently asked questions. So I hope that by the end of this evening, you're able to at least approach either the FAFSA or the DREAM Act a little bit more confidently. It is a federal form and a state level form. And so I think sometimes that causes a little bit of hesitation with families. It is very, very rare that anything goes wrong, and they are approachable, typically quick forms to fill out. On average, it takes about 30 minutes to do either one. So if for some reason you're ahead of the game and you already have your ID to log in, you can follow along with us this evening and actually probably complete your entire form with us as we walk through each step. So let's get started with the differences and what are these forms. So there are two applications for financial aid in California. We have a FAFSA, which stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And then we have the CADA, which is the California DREAM Act. I rarely hear anyone, counselors or students, refer to the DREAM Act as the CADA. So it will have that acronym throughout the presentation, but typically we'll refer to it as the DREAM Act. FAFSA is very well known as a FAFSA, and so we'll refer to that as such. On the bottom of this screen, you'll see the websites to begin each application. There are two different applications for a reason, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So they are both, like I said, federal and state level forms that qualify students for need-based financial aid and for potentially connecting students with merit-based aid. The FAFSA is the most appropriate financial aid application for students who are current US citizens and then eligible non-citizens. The most common category of non-citizen or permanent resident that is included on the FAFSA is described on their website, and that link is available here as well. I have another flow chart that I'll show you in just a moment that includes some of the visa qualifications for eligible non-citizens who would complete a FAFSA. The California DREAM Act is most appropriate for students who are residents of the state of California, but do not qualify under certain visa qualifications for the FAFSA. So it's the other application that is included for students to make sure that they are eligible for in-state financial aid, other types of Cal grants, and cool things that we're going to talk about today. In general, for both applications, this is applicable. The California Student Aid Commission has very strict security and confidentiality policies. And so the integrity and the confidentiality of student records for both forms is very, very important. They have not ever shared information with students' immigration status or other government entities. So that's just something to know about either one of these forms moving forward. So Futureology supports all students within CUSD. It is the absolute statement priority for the California Association of School Counselors that we welcome dreamers and we are allies for our undocumented students. So that is another way that students typically know to complete the California DREAM Act application. This was signed into law through AB 540, which establishes how we qualify students as eligible residents within our state. If you have questions about if you are an eligible student or what it takes to qualify under AB 540, please don't hesitate to ask. There are very, very specific qualifications. Most of our students, if you've been in CUSD or graduating from a capital high school for more than 3 years, you'll qualify and you would complete a DREAM Act application appropriately. March 2nd is the deadline for both of these applications. This is the priority California or Cal grant deadline within our state. Each state decides their priority deadline based on the types of state and federal aid that are offered to students that are attending college or trade schools. Cal Grant are the scholarship and aid programs typically from our state government that students know of. And so to qualify for those, in addition to federal student aid or loans, you have to complete these forms by March 2nd. We are well away from that. So by signing up and listening to this presentation this evening, I hope that you walk away knowing what you need to do before the March 2nd deadline. The application opened on October 1st, so it's a very, very large window each year for families to work on the applications and to make sure they're able to be completed on time. In CUSD, our registrars at your high schools automatically upload your GPA qualifications. So that's nothing additional that you need to do as a family. There's no form or release form that you need to sign. Sometimes that is a question that we get asked frequently around financial aid season, but our district automatically does that for students. So that's not something additional that you need to worry about. The only thing you need to worry about is selecting the correct form for your family and then completing it by the March 2nd deadline. Sounds easy enough, right? This worksheet or this flow chart, and I know it's a little bit fuzzy to see, will also describe more specifically, like I said, what type of visa holders or eligible non-citizens should complete each application. I want to make very clear that in the event, for whatever reason, you complete the incorrect form for you, it's a very easy fix. Our hope is that with the information that we provide tonight, you're able to select the correct form for yourself and complete those. But in the event for some reason that you started early, you made a mistake, it's a really easy switch to make sure that you complete the right form. But this flow chart will be available, like I said, in the slides at the end of the presentation this evening. So in regards to how you complete these forms, every year there is a little bit of confusion about what tax information or financial information is used. So when you think about your FAFSA or your California DREAM Act, you're going to use tax information from the prior year in regards to the aid year that you're looking at. So our current seniors, you are applying to attend college in 2022-23. So that means 2 years prior would be your tax information from 2020. So again, the application opened October 1st. We have a large window, but you're always going to use your tax information from prior years. I'll repeat many, many times that your FAFSA and your DREAM Act are renewable forms. So this might be your first time completing them, but it certainly will not be your last time completing them. Almost always students renew their FAFSA or their DREAM Act every single year that they plan to attend college. Once you complete the application once, the only thing that you're really updating every single year is your updated tax information. But again, that's always going to be from the prior year. So I know that that's a little bit interesting. Let that sink in. If you have your tax information from 2020, you're already off to a great start. So let's talk about how you create your FSAID or your login for the California DREAM Act. For your FAFSA, your initial FAFSA, you are going to go to studentaid.gov. That is the designated website. You are going to use the same login to file your initial FAFSA and also to make updates or renew your FAFSA every year. With FAFSA, your ID, your login information is connected to your Social Security identification number. So that stays with you, is pervasive throughout your time in college. It doesn't change. To create your ID, you're going to have to start an initial FAFSA if you've never done one before. And then once you have one on file, you can continue to update that one as it states on this slide. Probably the number one troubleshoot about creating your FAFSA ID is that it takes a week or two to verify or connect that information. So when you submit what you would like your ID number to be and your personal info, the federal government actually matches to make sure that that Social Security number and that name are the same. That means that if you're starting tonight and you have not created your FSA or your FAFSA login ID, you won't be able to start the application tonight. It takes a little while to verify before you're able to log in and actually complete part of the application. So if that looks a little bit interesting or different from what you remember, that's right, it's okay. Sometimes it takes a day or two to verify. We're now in more of the mid-range of the submission window between October and March. So sometimes that can take up to 2 weeks to verify. I have not seen it take that long previously, but it could be a week or two to verify your identity and make sure that it all matches. For the DREAM Act, For students who are completing your DREAM Act, you are going to register as a first-time user because you've never completed a DREAM Act before this year. When you do that, you're going to have to input an email login, a phone number, any other type of additional contact information that's a little bit different than if you were filing a FAFSA. When you select that you're a first-time user, you're also going to get an email that will select for you to change or select your password. This is correct. This is one of the different kind of idiosyncrasies of completing a DREAM Act, is that it's going to ask you to verify your identity each time that you log in because the state doesn't have an additional verification system in place for students who use this form. So when I log into my DREAM Act application, for example, to create this presentation, every single time that I log in, I have to verify my identity with an email code that is sent to me. So if you are a student or family that's completing a DREAM Act, just know to keep your phone or other device or login close to you as you start to create your account, because it will ask you several times to verify a code that sends within usually 5 to 10 minutes. So that's something that is just a little bit different about those two forms and creating your logins to begin. The checklist of items needed for completing each form. I should have prefaced this a little bit earlier, but I'm starting this presentation this evening talking about both forms simultaneously. After we go over the checklist of items that are needed for each of these documents, we are going to split. And I'm going to cover the FAFSA first and the DREAM Act second, just so there's no confusion about which form does what or which form looks like what. So just know that moving forward, we will definitely take one thing at a time. I know comparing and contrasting sometimes actually is not as efficient, but let's go back to the completed items or list of items you'll need to complete each of these forms. For your FAFSA, you'll actually need your social security number as a student and then one login or social security number as a parent. You'll need a driver's license if you have one, or your permanent residency card number if you are not a US citizen. That could be anything from a T or U visa number, a green card number, anything of that nature. You're also going to need your federal tax information, including your W-2s, your 1040s, 1040A, 1040EZ, whatever is appropriate for your financial situation, any foreign tax returns as well, and then any records of untaxed income, child support, interest, veteran or non-education benefits, any of those types of things are going to be helpful to have on hand. You're also going to need basic information about cash, savings, checking account balances, investments, stocks, bonds, real estate, things of that nature. Real estate does not include your primary residence, the current home that you live in, businesses or farm assets under a certain allocation. For the DREAM Act, very similar forms are going to be needed. The other thing that you'll need to know is more specific information about your household size, the number of people that are going to be in college from your household at the same time, if there are any, and then additional tax returns, identification numbers, anything else that you have that might be helpful to complete. So very, very similar things across the board for both forms. If you have any questions about things that you might need, both of these links at the top, the titles of these checklists are linked to an even more inclusive handout that we have on our website for these types of forms and other checklists of things that you might need. So if that's helpful for you, we'll definitely include those. So let's talk about completing sections of the application. This is really what you came for this evening. We are going to start, like I said, with the FAFSA. For my families who are watching at home, if you are completing the California DREAM Act, hang tight. We'll be right back with you in just a few moments. We are going to cover FAFSA first because it is a little bit longer. It has 7 sections. The other thing that you'll note about this presentation is that when we talk about the FAFSA versus the DREAM Act, moving forward in the presentation, the slides will be color-coded. So the first slide that we're talking about for FAFSA, you'll see is this light green in the background. That's intentional. All of the FAFSA screens are going to be a light green color. The California DREAM Act screenshots are going to be in the darker color that you'll see later in the presentation. So moving back to talk about FAFSA, there are 7 sections. Probably the things that give families the most trouble are 3, 4, and 5. So when we talk about dependency status, parent information, parent financial things, those are when we have the most questions from students and parents about completing the form itself. We're going to go through all 7 sections. We're actually going to go through all 6 sections to start, and then we'll collect together and talk about the signing and submission options for both forms, because they are actually very similar. So let's start with FAFSA and what it's going to look like when you log in. You're going to start with your student demographics, and you'll see on both of these screenshots, it has my personal information, and you're going to select what type of educational goal your student is currently going towards in their educational journey. So most students are working towards earning their high school diploma. They have not attended college yet. This is true even if students have college courses or dual enrollment types of credit that they've earned while in high school. They have never attended college full time, so that's still the appropriate selection. And they're working either towards their first bachelor's degree or whatever selection from the dropdown you feel is most appropriate for your student. Those also include trade and vocational programs, associate's degrees, all of those things. Will your student have their first bachelor degree before they begin the school year? No, they will not. So that's another kind of easy demographic piece of information as you start to fill out the form. Remember that this first section, again, is based on this individual student. You're answering questions on behalf of the student. The second section includes your school selection for your FAFSA. So your FAFSA has 10 spaces for you to add schools to receive this financial information for evaluation for financial aid purposes. I know lots of families who say, but Kristen, I'm applying to more than 10 schools. What do I do? That's okay. We typically recommend that students select at least 10, maximize the spaces and the spots that you have. And then from there, once you find out more information about where you've been admitted or where you're going to be attending college full-time, you can still make changes to your FAFSA to ensure that that particular school is on your list. So even though the deadline to submit the form for each is March 2nd, you're able to make changes up through June if, for example, you have a school that's added to your FAFSA that you're not going to be attending anymore, or that you found out you weren't accepted to. So the submission date is important, but know that you will be able to make changes and make selections through the June federal deadline as well. To select a school, you're just going to use the drop-down information. You can use location, you can use actual codes that are assigned to the U.S. Department of Education if you happen to have them or you see them on your college websites. But you're going to add up to 10 colleges to your list. This is how schools receive your financial information. This is how they begin to put together packages for financial aid, is with the information that you're reporting on your FAFSA. Outside of school selection, you're going to want to make sure that you click the check mark. This is one of the other common issues that we see with students, is they are easily able to search for the schools on their list, but they typically don't just click the check mark or save or add them to their application. Make sure you're checking the click mark, and then you can either save or click next to be able to make sure that those colleges are saved to your FAFSA. Once they're saved, you'll be able to see them in a full list at the bottom every time that you log in, and then you can change them or switch them out as you find out more about your admission status. Dependency determination. Now we're getting into more of the complicated questions that are included on your FAFSA. For most of the dependency questions, students will answer no. What these questions are helping to determine is this student considered independent, or are they still dependent on their parent or guardian for financial support? There definitely are circumstances where we have students that are considered independent. I have a lot of additional resources at the end of this presentation if you feel like maybe that applies to me. You can definitely speak with someone on our team and we can help make sure that you're filing your forms in the appropriate manner. If a student is considered independent, they are not required to submit any additional parent financial information. So the most common way that that happens is if a student is in foster care or has no active parent that's assigned to them through the court. That is, I think, probably the most common. So by and large, the majority of our students are considered dependent because they're even approaching 18 at this point. If you're answering no to most of these dependency questions, you are going to be prompted then to enter financial information on behalf of your parent. These are some of the questions that you'll see, and I apologize, the screenshot is a little bit blurry, but it's going to ask if you yourself as a student have any children or dependents of your own, if you are serving in the active military, things that our typical high school seniors are usually not doing, but it is possible. So if you look through some of these dependency determination questions and you have more of an inquiry, please feel free to look through the slides at the end of this presentation, and we'll make sure that we're able to clarify some of those things for you. And I see that we have a question in the Q&A. Thank you, B, so much for answering this. I'll clarify live a little bit as well. So who is applying, the parent or the student? The student is applying. For both FAFSA and DREAM Act, the majority of the questions are going to be in regards to the student. I always recommend that students log in with their parents so that they're able to see all of the questions that they're answering. But once you start with student demographics with the FAFSA, and you'll start with the student demographics in the California DREAM Act as well, you're going to be answering questions on behalf of the student until you get to the parent information and parent demographics section. So always think about this from the perspective of your 18-year-old senior, 17, 18-year-old senior. Exceptions or special circumstances to dependency: if you're a former, current, or foster youth, if you are a student that's experiencing homelessness, if you are an unaccompanied student, there will be additional documents requested to verify some of this information by your college. It is not something that is difficult to get from your schools. So if you feel like these things apply to you, again, please reach out to our team. We're happy to help you fill out these forms and make sure that you get them submitted appropriately. And then there will be additional resources located at the end of this presentation also. So we use the word typically parent or guardian very interchangeably as we talk with families in school counseling. For the purposes of your FAFSA and your DREAM Act, they are not interchangeable terms. So this is a flow chart that helps determine for families who is considered my parent, or what parent information do I need to include when I'm filling out this type of form. Of all of the questions that we get about financial aid, this is probably the most common, either from parents that are divorced, separated, in different types of living situations. I love this flow chart. I think that it is very, very comprehensive in terms of making sure you know who you need to include or who you don't need to include. But parent and guardian are not interchangeable forms, or interchangeable terms, I should say, for these types of forms. In that regard, unless these types of guardians have legally adopted you, they are not considered your parent. So if you have a widowed step parent, if you live with your aunt or uncle, if you live with your grandparents, your older brothers or sisters, you have foster parents or a legal guardian that is assigned to you, they are not your parent. And so they are not able to qualify as your parent for this particular form. I know that sometimes that can be very confusing for students if we, depending on all types of students' living situations, but that is something that is not interchangeable in terms of this form in particular. So if you live in any type of situation like this where you're not living with your biological family at this point, again, the flow chart I think is very, very helpful, and we'll put some links in the chat as well about where you can find some more information about if you have parents in different living situations, like whose information do you include. I'll actually put that in the chat right now, so everyone can search those if you need to, but that is probably by and large the most popular question or frequently asked question that we get is, who is included as a parent for my particular student? So unless you've been legally adopted, these people do not count, and that means that you could be considered an independent student. So that's just something to know. So for your parent financial information, we are now actually rounding out the end or the kind of final piece of the FAFSA. There are two different ways that you can report the financial information as a parent. There is an IRS retrieval tool that will automatically load your tax information if it's already been filed from 2020 into the FAFSA itself, or you can manually input the information on your own if you have those forms readily available. The retrieval tool is very convenient, but there are certain circumstances where it's not as helpful for families. So if you've been the victim of identity theft, if you are a student who's married, or a parent who is married but filing separately, or as head of household, the retrieval tool is not going to be an option for you or work for you. If a parent's status is unmarried, but they're legally living together, that's another weird situation where the IRS retrieval tool doesn't work as well for you. And that would be a situation where you need to input manually your information. I personally, in all of the years that I was in college, graduate school and beyond, manually input my own tax information every single year. So I promise if a counselor can do it, you guys can do it too. The FAFSA form will actually ask you line by line. It will itemize the numbers and the information from your W-2s and your 1040s that you need to include. So as long as you have them close by you, it's actually pretty simple to do. The only thing that is a little bit tricky is if for some reason you haven't filed your 2020 taxes yet, that would be something that you definitely want to get started before you start to complete these forms so that you're reporting the most accurate information. Or if you try to use the retrieval tool for whatever reason and it's down. Again, the FAFSA is a federal form, so similar to other federal agencies that we use, like the post office or the DMV, sometimes it goes down because a lot of people use it. So that could also be an issue too. But if you have to input your information manually, not a big deal, totally possible. So what information does the FAFSA or the DREAM Act actually use? Again, it uses your tax information from 2 years prior, your prior year returns. It will use recent statements from any type of investment accounts, stocks, bonds, or other commodities that you have. It will include information if you have a 529 savings plan or other type of savings accounts. And then any documentation of your overall family's financial strength and net worth of investment properties. Again, your primary home value is not included in terms of your evaluation for any type of aid. The information that is not used, the value of your primary home. If you have a family farm or a small business with fewer than 100 employees, that's also not included as an asset. And then anything within your 401k IRA accounts, your pension funds or plans is not evaluated as a part of your total financial aid eligibility for your student. So I know that there is a lot of confusion sometimes in terms of what information is used or what information is not typically included for your calculation for financial aid. These are the things that are and are not typically included. The overall calculation is set by the U.S. Department of Education each year. So it does change a little bit. It can vary year to year, but these things have been the same primarily for several years now. They have not changed at all. So let's look at student financial information, which is the next section after parent financial information. You are only going to enter student financial information if, as a student, you filed taxes in the year 2020. I don't have this happen very often where students worked enough within the school year to have to file taxes. But if you do have a student or you as a student have filed taxes in the year 2020, that information will also be requested as a part of your FAFSA form. That's the FAFSA. That's in a very quick, succinct way. Those are really all of the sections. We're going to talk about the DREAM Act in the same fashion, kind of line by line, screen by screen. And then we're going to talk about signing and submitting both of these forms at the end or closer to the end of our presentation later this evening. We're making great time, y'all. Thank you for sticking with me. I'm very hopeful that we'll have plenty of time to answer your questions and be done a little bit early this evening. So if you've joined us, thanks again. We're getting there. The California DREAM Act is a much simpler form. It includes only 3 sections, and it is, I think, simplified on purpose. It doesn't include as many sections, but it includes almost all the same information, but it is more of a 3-step process. So when you sign in to complete your DREAM Act. It's going to give you two options. For our current seniors, you are looking to complete the 2022-2023 school year option. That is the option you're going to be in college. So I know that we're currently in the 21-22 school year, but you're still in high school this year. So make sure you're completing your FAFSA for next year's eligibility when you're going to be in college. In your DREAM Act, you'll notice at the very top bar that the academic year will always be flagged for you. This is something that's a little bit different than in the FAFSA. You have an additional flag that will show you on each application where you're at or what year you're completing it for. The FAFSA will not have that. You'll see that there is a highlighted bar here underneath the student information, and that means that all of the information for the first section is about student demographics and student information. So you'll see as we move to more of the parent sections, the bar will move over and you'll know that they're asking questions about the parent at that point. In terms of the information you'll need to start your DREAM Act, it's mostly demographic information, and make sure that you are saving your application. The DREAM Act times out a lot quicker than the FAFSA does. And so if you're not clicking save regularly, it will not save all of your information each time, whereas the FAFSA tends to keep you logged in quite consistently. So make sure that you're saving your application. If you're clicking next, you will also be saving your application as you work through. So the first part is just going to be, again, student demographic information, more information about your student. It's going to ask about your citizenship status because you're not completing a FAFSA. For almost all of our students who are going to be completing a DREAM Act, you're going to select that you are not a citizen, but that you meet the eligibility as a non-citizen for in-state tuition. Again, if you're unsure if you qualify for that or what your status is, please, please, please don't hesitate to email or reach out to our team, and we're happy to clarify which form you need to complete. That is the selection that you will choose that will unlock the rest of the application for you. So it will ask you as a student more information about, are you earning your high school diploma? Are you going to have your first degree already as you start college next year? What grade level are you going to be? And those are all very similar. So for most of our students, they're earning their high school diploma at this point. They will not have their first bachelor's degree at the beginning of the year, and they're going to be starting or attempting their first full-time college experience. If those differ for your student, please let us know and we can clarify those too. It's going to ask you more about your parent information, even in the student view. This is another thing that's a little bit quirky and specific to the California DREAM Act. So it's going to ask you about your parent demographic information, even though we're still in the student tab. It's going to ask specifically if you know what type of education your parent has completed, and you can put those there as well. You'll notice that on some of the questions, they will be asterisked, so they're required, and then others will not be. So any question like this that has an asterisk on it will be required for you to answer. If you don't know this information, both of these questions, for example, don't have an asterisk, they're optional. It's also going to ask you more information about the current high school that you attend, and then also about the colleges or potential college options that you're interested in. So for your DREAM Act, you're going to add your specific high school that you're currently enrolled at. Make sure that you save that as well. There's another little check mark box for you. And then you're going to start to add additional colleges to your application. They look just like this. So in terms of an interface, it is very similar to the FAFSA, but you will be able to add, again, only 10 colleges to your California DREAM Act. So if you have more schools that you're interested in or that you're applying to than that, that's okay. Same thing, you'll be able to make changes through June. So you should know where you're attending by the time your form is actually completely locked for the year. Make sure you add, again, as many schools as you're applying to. So don't leave any out if you have additional schools, or don't feel like you are only limited to the options there, spaces that you have. Beyond there, you're going to start answering dependency questions again on behalf of the student. These are examples of some of the dependency questions. So do you have children or kids of your own or other dependents that you're responsible for? Are you living in a household that is particularly large or small? How many people live in your household? And then do you have any other types of dependents that you're responsible for? Finally, it's going to ask for the student financial information in this section. So if you've completed taxes as a student who's had a job, you can fill those out, or you'll notice for the most part, these sections are not required, because I would say the majority of students have not completed a tax return or worked enough hours to complete a tax return for the year 2020 at this point. The final part of the student information is asking if you receive any other types of benefits that qualify through state aid. So that includes like temporary assistance, free and reduced lunch, any type of Medicaid or supplemental Social Security. Those are things that are going to be really specific to your family and individual situation. But if you're not sure if you qualify or receive any of those things, you can definitely reach out to your high school counselors or to anyone on our team, and we can clarify what those things are for you if you're unsure. Finally, we're going to move to the second section of the DREAM Act, which is parent information. The parent information for the DREAM Act only has 2 sections, very similar to the FAFSA. It includes their marital status, so who do you live with and where are your parents at this point, and then what type of tax information can we include if possible. It's going to ask for your parents' identification number if they have one. Sometimes we have students who are filling out the DREAM Act that don't have an ITN or specific visa number. That's okay. You can just enter zeros all the way through if they don't have a particular ID number. If they do have a taxpayer ID, of course, that would be the number that you enter there. And then it's going to ask more information about your parent household. Your parent household information should match the household information you reported as a student. It's pretty rare, unless you are not living together, that those things would differ. But typically they will match the student household information section. And then from there, it's going to ask about their filing status. So if you've already completed, again, your tax returns for the year 2020, you'll be able to start entering your return information based on your tax forms. It's going to ask for adjusted income. These are examples of the types of things that they're going to ask or could ask for. Again, similar to the FAFSA, there will be a line item listed. So for most manual inputs, this should be fairly straightforward for most of our families. There shouldn't be too many things that you are calculating on your own or that you have to guesstimate. If anything, they should all be listed. And then same thing, kind of finally for the financial piece of information for the parent section, it's going to ask if as a family or as a parent, did you receive any of these other additional state aid or assistance programs? So if as a parent, you're unsure of these things too, again, please reach out to your school counseling team. I'm sure that we can help navigate some of those terms or programs for you if you're unsure if you've received or if you've ever participated in any of those as well. That's what the forms look like. I know that we breezed through that pretty quickly, and actually signing and submitting the forms is typically where we again have the most questions. So let's look at options for submitting both your FAFSA and both your DREAM Act. So for your FAFSA, there are a few different options for students. One is an electronic signature option. This is the most common, I think, for our families. The FAFSA includes a signature option if you as a parent have a login for a FAFSA as well. So when your student is creating an account, the only way for you to sign or complete your FAFSA form with your student is for you as a parent to also create an account to sign. As a parent, you only need, if you're in a nuclear married household, only one parent needs to have a login to sign. Both parents, even if their financial information is included, do not need a login or ID to sign. So that alleviates a little bit of pressure off one of you. Most students, I think, will choose to use this online signature form. And you'll see as you work through the application, you'll have green little check marks all at the top, as long as your things are done. You can sign your FAFSA, like it says at the bottom of this link, and it will electronically have you enter in your personal information and have you log in from the parent perspective to do that. If as a parent, you're unsure of your FSAID or your password or anything of that nature, if you've had older siblings or other students who have gone through this process before, it's a very easy process to reset your password and gain access to that. But because the FAFSA is a federal form, it will always be assigned to your Social Security number. So there's never a situation where you're going to create a new FSAID as a parent, unless for some reason your Social Security number changed, which I've never come across that before, but I don't doubt that it's possible. So if you have had a login previously, that is the way that you would sign it in terms of your FAFSA. FAFSA also offers a printed signature page option for students and families to use. So if you are interested in that option, either you don't feel comfortable electronically signing, as a parent, you would prefer not to have an FSAID, there is an option for you to print a physical signature page like this. And then there is an address that's listed on the bottom where you would physically snail mail that form in, and it can be matched to your students' records. I recommend, if you're going to go that route, that you use a tracking number or have some type of tracking number on it, just because it is in Kentucky. So it can be a little bit farther away than you think to get something to a PO box if you choose to go the snail mail route instead of the electronic signature route, but that is an option also. You will not get to the parent print signature page option until your student signs and submits their form. So that's another question we get frequently is, I think that I want to do the signature page option instead, but I'm not seeing it anywhere. You won't see it until your student actually submits. So it's a secondary part, or the parent is actually the last step in the submission process for the signature page option. For the DREAM Act, the applications are very, very similar. Same two options included. You're able to electronically sign, and they actually will ask you within the DREAM Act to use a mouse to physically sign on behalf of yourself. And then there will be a place for you to print a parent signature page if you don't feel as a parent you would like to electronically sign the document or create an ID to do so. So when you get to the signing and submitting page, especially on the DREAM Act, very similar to the FAFSA, you won't be able as a parent to sign and submit either form until your student does. So as a student, you have to sign and submit your form before you get the option for your parent to also do so. For the DREAM Act, please make sure that you keep a record of your DREAM Act ID number. Unlike the FAFSA, where that ID is associated with the account that you create yourself, your DREAM Act ID number is assigned to you randomly. So it's more itemized like an ID. Keep track of that, write that down somewhere. It will be emailed to you, of course, so that you have any questions about the status of your application or anything that has to do with it. You'll have a quick reference number to use if you need to contact the help desk. Once you submit, your parent signature button on the DREAM Act will pop up at the top right here, and that's how your parent can electronically sign as well. So why would you print a signature page for either application, but specifically for the DREAM Act, instead of the electronic option? For the DREAM Act, typically the only reason why you would submit a parent signature form via snail mail is if your parent is currently out of the country and unable to log in and sign. I have had that happen a few times where a student's living situation in the United States is with a legal guardian, but not with their parent. Their parent information is what we needed to complete the form. And so we had to use snail mail in order to get that signature page and get that completed. For the FAFSA form or FAFSA page, the other reason why you might print this form typically is when we have students who are in what we call a combination or mixed documentation status. So maybe the student has a social security number, is a US citizen, but the parent is not. In that situation, the parent cannot create an FSAID because they have no ID number. And so instead, their only option is to complete the form as a student with their social security number and to print the signature page and submit that way. That's a very common process that we help students with. So that would be some of the reasoning behind why you would go the snail mail route instead of the electronic submission route for either one of these forms. In terms of mistakes that we typically see as students start to fill out these forms or work through them, questions about legal guardianship, choosing their parent or who is the head of household. Sometimes we have students who incorrectly report the number of members in their family, or they're unsure of the number of children that will be in college that are considered in their family. Other mistakes that are very often seen is only using one college or listing one college or university, including additional assets from a financial perspective that should not be included, like the value of your primary residence or your retirement plans. Not trying to use the IRS retrieval tool. If it is available to you, please try. It will definitely save you time. Or confusing student and parent in regards to answering those questions. So I always recommend that families do either form together if they can. When the FAFSA and the DREAM Act are asking, for information on behalf of the student, typically it will always just say you. When you're looking at the forms, the DREAM Act is a little bit nicer because it gives you that bar at the top over each section. FAFSA will separate the sections out for you, but almost always when it's asking questions, it's asking in regards to the student, not the parent. The other thing that is super, super common and is just a silly mistake that we see often is students who incorrectly enter their birthday, their address, any of their individual verifying information. That sometimes happens at the very beginning stages when they're creating their FSAID, and then their identity is unable to be verified if they don't know their social security number or they don't enter in something correctly. So just like your college applications, please try your best to thoughtfully work through each of these and to work slowly as you enter in information in regards to your identity in particular. So what happens after you sign or submit each form? So the financial aid process is cyclical in that it all starts with either one of these forms. So students and families complete either their FAFSA or their DREAM Act. That information then is relayed to the colleges on your list that are included to determine eligibility or need of a particular student. And they notify you as a family if you are selected for verification. Students need to be checking their college emails, their portals to see if they are flagged. And then typically you might be asked to verify additional information that you've provided or things of that nature. If as a student, you're not checking your email or you are flagged for verification and you haven't provided that information to your college, your file's considered incomplete. So at that point, it's kind of a stalemate. You won't be evaluated any further if a college determines that they want to verify some of your information. It's a super, super common process, but you will be considered incomplete at that point. So check your email as much as you can. After submission, you will receive an email outlining what type of aid you typically qualify for. That's called an SAR, or Student Aid Report, which is emailed directly to the student. In regards to that, it will also include qualifications for loan information, and it will include a calculation called an EFC. An EFC stands for your expected family contribution. It is a number based on your family's financial strength. It is not the price or amount that you will pay for college. Your EFC calculations are used by your college's financial aid office to determine what types of aid you might qualify for or what types of aid you don't qualify for. But it is not the number that you will actually pay for your student to attend college. I mentioned briefly verification. Verification typically applies to FAFSA filers only. It can apply to California DREAM Act filers if they're looking to verify your residency status only. But verification is a process that your colleges will use to confirm the data that you report on your FAFSA or DREAM Act is accurate. In some instances, your school can require you to submit additional copies of your IRS tax transcripts or signed copies of your tax returns as a part of that process. If you're flagged for verification, it's incredibly important that you submit the forms that they're requesting soon. Otherwise, like I said, you'll just stay in limbo. About 50% of students each year are flagged for verification, and that helps colleges reduce fraud, ensure that students are completing their forms appropriately. So it's just an additional step. It's not something to be scared of or afraid of, and it happens actually quite frequently. Like I said, for California DREAM Act filers, typically the only reason you would be flagged for verification is for your residency information, and that's typically handled with your high school transcript or other documents that they'll request from you, but typically very simple to respond to and to make sure it's all handled quickly. The last couple of pages of our presentation this evening are just additional resources. I'm not going to go through every single resource that we have here because a lot of them have to do with dependency status, but in the link that we send out for all of you to review these slides, please feel free to look at those if you feel like there are some additional resources or things that you need based on your family's personal financial situation. But there are definitely some things that qualify or that could be helpful for all families as they think about their financial aid options. On the California Student Aid Commission website, there is a college cost calculator. There are calculators on most of your college websites that are called a net price calculator. This one is very similar. The difference in the California Student Aid Commission calculator is that if you're already including your tax information and filling out your forms, you'll be able to input those into the calculator directly. So it can be a little bit more accurate, but it can walk you and your student through what a loan payment might look like if you're considering taking out student loans, what types of work study or other financial aid opportunities, including scholarships, could you qualify for based on your family's financial strength or situation. And then it will also compare for you the total direct cost of attendance. In our previous webinar, we discussed, what is the total price of college? So it's not just tuition and fees, even though that's what we typically think of when we think of the cost of college itself. So if you have some questions or if you haven't necessarily had that conversation as a family yet about what your total cost or bill might look like, this is a great tool to use to compare different offers and be able to see things side by side. The other thing that is on the California Student Aid Commission list is a financial aid frequently asked questions letter. They have sample award letters of things that you might be receiving from your colleges as they review your financial aid information. So they are definitely super helpful to take a look at and review before some of those start to come in the spring semester. You'll see for most types of letters, you'll have an estimated cost of attendance, and then it will break down for you exactly what the student might pay. It's always going to start with the full cost. So I think sometimes that is a little bit jarring or a little bit surprising for families to read. It's always going to start with the full price number, and then it's going to itemize your deductions or itemize the types of financial aid that you would qualify for to see your net price or what you might actually pay. So think beyond the big numbers that you see here, but it does take a little bit of practice to be able to read these letters and know exactly what the itemized options are included there. So there are lots of samples on the California Student Aid website. I highly recommend them. I think that they're awesome. That is it. I finished right when I wanted to at 7:30. I know that we're scheduled till 8. I wanted to make sure that we had some additional time for questions for families. Thank you so much to Bea and Monica for answering some of those as we were speaking. But if there are any additional questions from our families that are joining us tonight about either form, the types of forms, what you will need to complete them, please drop them into the Q&A, and we're happy to answer those as we round out this evening. If you have questions about when these things are due, if as a parent you want support to complete these forms, our team is definitely available into the spring semester to help you do so. But I hope that at least this demystifies a little bit about what's on each form and how to complete them. If you followed along tonight, you could have maybe completed your form if you already had an FAFSAID. Jaden, you have a specific question about your parent. Jaden, do me a favor, since your situation is pretty specific, drop your email in the chat for us, or email our batch email, CUSD-Futureology@CapoUSD, and I would be happy to help you fill out that form because I know that your situation is specific to you, and I want to make sure that we get the correct answer for you. Awesome. Thank you, guys. We'll definitely follow up with you after we're done. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, guys. Bea and Monica, any common questions that we saw this evening?
No, in fact, you answered all of them. There weren't many actually, so you did a great job because there were not a lot of questions.
Thanks. I hope so. Jaden, our team is absolutely happy to follow up with you. I'll make sure that we send you an email really shortly. And then beyond that, of course, to our families that are still here with us this evening, if you haven't started your forms and you start to work on either your FAFSA or your DREAM Act and you have additional questions, feel free to reference this slide deck. Feel free to reference this recording if you need to, or please reach out to our team via our batch email as well. We're happy to make sure that there are appointments for families to complete these forms or workshops or space at any of our high school campuses to help you complete these in a timely manner, definitely before March 2nd. And otherwise, we will round out early. I'm so happy to let everyone go a little bit early this evening to enjoy their dinner and their evening. And if there's anything else that comes up in regards to financial aid, we'll be back in the spring with some additional presentations and additional supports for families as well. If you have a moment, feel free to scan our QR and give us some feedback about any of the presentations that we've done this semester, this one included, or if there's something that you'd like to see from our team into the springtime, that's always welcome as well. Thank you, Joy. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your evening to be with us. We really appreciate it. And if you start to complete your forms and have more questions, please feel free to let us know.